This is John Abrams, and this is The Variety Artist, episode 62. I really had fun with this interview because my guest today is in the same business as me, School Assemblies. That's what I do, and that's what he does. Matt probably does as many or more assemblies than anyone in the country, including me. If you're even thinking about doing school assemblies, you gotta listen to this conversation. It's a fun way to make a living. Enjoy.
Welcome to The Variety Artist, providing aspiring artists and entertainers with in-depth discussions from top performers from all over the world. So get ready to book some gigs, make some money, and have some fun with your host, John Abrams.
From winning AGTs YouTube competition and FOX TVs 30 Seconds of Fame to a semifinalist on AGT, he's used his BMX and motivational speaking skills to inspire students around the country. 3-time X Games medalist, 2-time national champion, and Guinness World Record holder. Variety Artist, I give you the amazing anti-bullying BMX school assembly guy, Matt Wilhelm.
Yo, what's up?
How's it going, Matt?
Yeah, doing great.
Good. I mentioned a lot of stuff, so we're going to start off with school assemblies. Just so people get a perspective of this, how many assemblies do you do a year about?
Oh gosh, I do too many. I keep saying every year I'm going to do less and it turns into more. So this school year, if you count August to end of June, I will have done 482. I just booked one for June 13th. So 482 school shows. Mm-hmm. And then I now kind of take the summers off. I used to perform at like Universal Studios over the summer and do some like festivals and fairs. My show is just perfect for school. So I try and just do school. So then I think I did like maybe 4 Cub Scout shows, 4 summer camps, and like I think I have 1 library book. So I'm trying just to do schools now.
Gotcha. And you take the summers off and weekends off?
Yeah, weekends off. And I've tried to not do this year. I tried something new. No night shows other than the 4 Cub Scout things. But I didn't do any family night shows and really no weekend stuff either because I'm trying to see my kids and have a life other than doing a show.
How many kids do you have?
Just 2. I have a 6-year-old. My son Zach is actually going to be 4 tomorrow.
Oh, congratulations.
Yep.
You and I are kind of in the same business because I do school assemblies, as you know.
Sure.
On bullying, on the same subject, as a matter of fact. Way different shows, but same subject. My kids just moved out, and that's why I'm doing this podcast.
School shows are great because, you know, I always say like, yeah, it's rare that a performer gets to sleep in their own bed, eat breakfast with their kids, and not be on the road all the time. That's another reason why I'm like just trying to do schools. It's perfect for kind of where I'm at right now in my life.
Oh, yeah. And when your kids get into elementary and middle school, you'll be home to help with them with their homework and hang out with them after school.
Yep, exactly.
Now, what grades do you do?
I do mainly K through 8 now. The sweet spot for me is usually like intermediate grades, 3rd through 5th, and I do really well at middle schools. I do great at primary schools too, you know, like K through 2, but I have to change up the message so much for the little guys. Yeah. It's almost like my time is better spent with the older kids. It's kind of like if you were like a really good Ford mechanic, right? And they were like, well, can you work on the Chevy? And you're like, I can work on a Chevy, but I'm really good at working on the Fords.
Oh, yeah.
My show is like perfect for like 3rd through 8th. But, you know, I do tons of K through 2. And when I do a school show, like an elementary, I usually try and break it up into K1, 2, and 3rd through 5th, just because I can really change my message more for the older kids.
And those little kids, they want it fast and furious.
Yeah.
More action and fun than message.
Sure, exactly.
If you can give them a couple of good messages that their teachers can do.
Yep.
After the assembly, then you're good as gold.
Exactly right. Keep it kind of simple.
Now, for people who haven't seen you, what does your act look like?
Oh, so yeah, I should probably explain what I do because a lot of people are like, wait, what do you do again?
Yeah.
So I ride BMX, like picture like a kid's 20-inch bike, the same bike that most people outgrew. Well, I never stopped riding it. And I do what's called BMX flatland. So it's just tricks on the ground. A lot of people would call it freestyle. Like I don't go in the air. I don't do any jumps other than like when I jump over teachers at the end of a show, but there's like no ramps involved, right?
Okay.
And what I'm known for is spinning on the bike in circles real fast. My mom would call it like ballet on a bike. I would call it breakdancing on a bike, but that's kind of what I do. Yeah.
It's like a generational thing.
I never really intended to be a performer. So I started riding in like junior high, and then I started competing as an amateur. I turned pro when I was in college, and I got last place during my first year in the X Games. So I had like one more year to make it work. And my senior year in college, I was going to job fairs. I was like totally going to wear the suit and tie and get like a regular job. Right before graduation, I won the X Games trials. So I actually beat the guy who won the X Games the year before. And I made 11 grand in that weekend.
Wow.
And I remember my mom was like riding me hard to like get a job. She's like, well, I don't know about this bike thing. I'm like, Mom, I made 11 grand this weekend. She's like, that's great, honey. But you know, you really need to find a job. And about 2 minutes later in the phone call, she goes, wait, did you say 1100 or 11,000? I was like, 11,000. I'm like, let's just see where this goes. And then at graduation, the president of the university had me stand up during his keynote speech as like graduates who are going on to like interesting careers. And I think that's when it kind of clicked for my parents. Like, all right, let's see where this bike thing goes. I don't know if you ever heard like Steve Martin. I think he was about to quit stand up, but then he got like one good review from like Miami and he's like, all right, I'm going to keep it going just in the nick of time. And that's kind of how it was for me.
Well, that's such a great message on I went to your website and one of your videos says from last place to national champion. What a great selling point that is.
Yeah, it's a great story. And, you know, when it happened, so I got last place my first year. And obviously when it happens, you're thinking it's the end of the world. But man, like getting last in the X Games was like a great career move as far as like a motivational speaker, because it's such a great story. It's memorable for the kids and you can apply it to many different stories and many different messages too. And truthfully, it was really good for me because it kind of gave me a kick in the rear end because I was like a decent pro. I probably would have placed middle of the pack and it kind of just lit a fire under me. And then as soon as I got back from the X Games that year, I learned some tricks that I thought were impossible. I'm like, screw it, I'm going for it. If I break my leg, I don't care. It just kind of all worked out.
Wow. Now, what made you go from there to start doing School Assemblies? So
I was doing X Games and then I had sponsors. So they would book me for like NBA halftime shows. And so I was doing NBA halftime shows. I was performing at Universal Studios in Orlando for a while.
Yeah.
This Matt Hoffman show. We were like the top rated show in their history, which was pretty cool. But I was always working for someone else. And it was like really stressful way to make a living. Like, all right, if I don't place well in this contest, like I'm not going to get paid. My sponsors aren't going to be happy. They might drop me. I had done some stuff for this local team and we did like festivals and fairs and then we had done a couple school shows and we didn't really have a message, but we kind of did. It was like an anti-drug message, but like the guy who ran the team didn't even follow that message in his own personal life. So it was like really wrong, but I kind of saw the light and I'm like, all right, this could be really cool. I was telling that story at schools about how I got last in the X Games and then I did like a bike safety thing. And then in about 2005 or 2006, a school was like, hey, can you talk about bullying? And I was like, oh, you want me to talk about that? I can definitely talk about that.
By the way, that was about the same time I created my bully show too, about 2006.
I think that's kind of when it was starting to gain a little traction. And then it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah.
People had done school shows before and there's obviously other kinds of bike shows, right? But I do a one-person show. So I'm like my own announcer and I never even would have considered this. So when I was in college, this variety juggler performer named Circus Boy, he's from Chicago. He's awesome. Came to my college and he did a show. And one of the tricks he did was on a BMX bike. And he was like juggling while doing tricks on a bike. And I was like, this guy has to ride BMX. So I go up to him afterwards. I'm like, hey, Circus Boy, how long you been riding BMX? He's like, huh? And he had no idea what I was talking about. So long story short, fast forward like 4 years later, I see him at a bike shop in my town and he had the Guinness record for riding the world's smallest bike. And he was looking for a part for it at the bike shop. So I got out my bike and I said, hey, let me show you what I do. And so he was like, dude, that's awesome. He goes, hey, let me give you some advice. If you ever do a show, don't hire an announcer. Do a one-person show. You can develop better chemistry with the audience. You don't have to pay somebody else. You can make your schedule. And like, had I not run into Circus Boy at that bike shop, I guarantee I still would have an announcer. Right now, my show would be totally different. It would be less intimate. So it was like, just like the fate of the whole thing. It was kind of cool how it worked out.
Well, the great thing about your show, we have in Southern California, a lot of BMX guys. And if you're listening to this, I'm sorry for what I'm about to say, but your show has such great messages. Some of the BMX shows in Southern California, they do their regular BMX jumping ramp thing. And then at the end, hey, kids, don't do drugs.
Oh, yeah, right.
That's their no drug show. Or, hey, kids, don't bully each other.
Don't be a bully. Yep.
Yeah. Whereas you have very clear and concise messages.
Yeah, so my show is broken up into like 3 main messages. So I'll do tricks at the beginning, get their attention for 5 minutes. Then I'll do my talk about how I got last in the X Games. That's about 4 or 5 minutes. Then I'll do tricks with a little audience participation in the middle for maybe 10 minutes. And then my main bullying talk is like in the middle. And depending on the age, if it's K through 2, that's maybe like 8 minutes. If it's junior high or 3rd through 5th, it's more like 12 to 13 minutes maybe. Then I'll do some more tricks, and then my last message is about 3 to 5 minutes, and then I close with like a finale of sorts. So the compliments I always get from the teachers and staff are like, oh, we love the pacing of your show. You know, how you break it up. You don't just talk for a while. Like you split it up, and it keeps people on their toes.
Sure. How long is your show?
3rd through 8th grade is like 45, and then K2 is like 40.
And then can you shorten it?
I can, but when I do, like I had to do a 28-minute show the other day just because they put me too close to dismissal, and they booked me on purpose on early release day. But it sucked because it was like for the older kids, and I do more with the message for the older kids. And like I had to figure out how to do it in 28 minutes, and I had to cut out the whole glass message, and I just cut out some of the easier tricks. But yeah, I mean, I can always adapt, you know.
Yeah, that's one of the things I always suggest is to create a 5 or 8 minute routine that you can just simply cut. And it's not going to affect the structure of the show.
And the way my show is, it's not like I'm setting up like a big like magic trick where there's like a 5-minute lead into a trick. It's like I could just cut anything I want on the fly. Each trick takes like, 10, 20 seconds.
Gotcha.
It doesn't really matter. And I had a big aha moment when I started doing these shows. So I come from like a competition background, right? Where the focus was competition. And you would just kind of use shows at like festivals and fairs basically for like training. You're like, all right, if I could pull this like hard trick on this horrible ground with wind and people cheering, I'll definitely be able to do it in a contest. So when I started doing school shows, I would do my hardest tricks. It was too complicated for the kids because there was like too much going on. They didn't know when to clap. So I did my hardest trick once and nobody clapped. And I got really mad like on the inside. And so I did this trick called the Spider-Man, which it's like a joke basically. You picture like doing a handstand on a wall.
Yeah, I've seen it.
You're doing a handstand on the bike. And so I did that and the kids all went nuts. And I'm like, well, my life just got way easier because I don't have to send it every show. I could just do the Spider-Man. The kids will love it and it'll just be easier.
Oh yeah. Do what they love. Don't necessarily do what's hard.
That's right. Give the people the tricks and I have to do a wheelie every show because if you don't do a wheelie, a kid always goes up and he goes, hey, can you do a wheelie? And you're like, I did a wheelie in circles with the bicycle upside down. I was actually pedaling the bike upside down, but you want to see a straight wheelie? It's turned into a joke every show. And it's kind of a fun little bit.
Well, now, have you ever crashed during your show?
Oh gosh. So yeah, I've had school show. I play it really safe, right? So my friend's wife booked me at a school and I always have this part of my show where I go, who wants to see a crash? And
oh no,
you people are sick. And it turns into this running gag of like, they want to see a crash. Well, I actually crashed like right after I said that. My head hit the ground. Oh, I wear a helmet, but it was my friend's wife's school. So she came home and she told my friend Craig, she goes, Matt was awesome. He even did this fake crash. It looks so real. And so Craig called me up. He's like, fake crash. He's like, dude, I've seen your show. Ain't no fake crash in your show.
Oh, no.
So that was a good one. My most embarrassing crash was, it wasn't really a crash. It was a real tight gym. They had a hula hoop rack on the wall. Like picture like a rod sticking out with maybe 10 hula hoops hanging on it. Well, instead of turning around the corner, I just kind of leaned against the wall and put my body against the wall. And I hit the bottom of the hula hoops and the hula hoops went over my whole head and body like a slinky.
Oh no.
And I was stuck in the hula hoops and I couldn't get out and the kids were laughing and like the PTA mom tried to come over and rescue me from these hula hoops. So that was super embarrassing crash.
They're like, do it again, do it again,
yeah.
do it again.
And then I was like, I'm going to do a trick with these hoops. Don't worry. And the kids were like, okay. I obviously never did a trick with the hoops. See, I just said that to pretend like I was doing something.
Oh man. So what are the weirdest things that happen? Is that the weirdest thing?
No, I mean, you know how it is. Like you perform in schools.
Oh yeah.
There's always something weird going on. I used to do a lot of these fundraising shows where the kids would like earn the show as a prize. So you're doing a show for maybe like 50 kids, but there's 800 kids at the school, but you're only doing 50. So there's like no teachers in there, right? So I was doing this like junior high school, and the high school weight room was attached to the gym above the bleachers, but there were no teachers in there for my show. Midway through my bullying talk, I don't know if it was a football team, these guys just started working out. But I don't know if you've ever heard that Adam Sandler skit where he tries to, you have to figure out if the guys are working out in the gym or if they're really just having sex. So these guys are like, "Ruh, ruh." It was really uncomfortable, but you couldn't do anything because there were no teachers in there. I couldn't be like, hey, stop. So that was obviously weird. There was a middle school where they insisted on filling every single seat in the bleachers and the aisle. So the kids couldn't get out of the bleachers.
Yeah.
I'm sure a kid would have tried to get out of the bleachers, but he couldn't. He was stuck. So he projectile vomited over like 10 kids. And it was like a middle school kid. So it was like, there was like a lot to it.
Is this during your show?
This is not only during my show, this is during like the most key emotional low moment of my bullying talk, where I hit like that emotional low, and it was the worst timing. I can't even count how many times my bullying talk has been interrupted. This one time, there was like a boombox in the gym, and she sat down on this table and her butt hit the boombox, and it fired up the CD, which was the pacer test, which is like, okay, we're going to do sit-ups. 1, 2, 3. You know, there's just always something going on.
I can't tell you how many times I've been in the middle of the show and I look out and there's 7 or 8 kids are just kind of scurrying around. And I wonder what the heck's going on. And then after the show, I'll go over to a teacher or something nearby, and they said, well, somebody peed during the show.
Yeah.
Or someone threw up.
Or have you ever had the fire alarm go off? I had the fire alarm go off. A teacher was cooking popcorn in the teacher's lounge, and it was one of those where you just turn the dial, and she probably just turned it for like 10 minutes. We had to evacuate, and it was the middle of winter, and it was kind of like a bad neighborhood. So we're out in the main busy street in the middle of winter. Great. You know, 600 kids waiting for the fire department to come. That was a good one.
Oh, yeah. You're in Illinois, right?
Yeah.
Here in Southern California, winter's not that much different than summer. It's nice and warm. And
don't brag about it.
But you had to go out in the winter?
Oh, yeah.
It was all snowing and cold?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was not good.
Oh, man. Now, you did AGT.
Sure, yeah.
And before we even talk about AGT and a number of different things that you've done are on your video on your website. It just looks so great. Do a lot of people mention that when they call you for bookings?
Yeah, they're always like, oh, your video's great, and then you got to live up to the hype of the video. But, the thing with using the TV footage, which, you probably shouldn't do, it just looks really good. It's not like amateur footage you filmed at like a school show. So I like tons of school show footage, but I'm like, it never looks as good as the AGT footage or the 30 Seconds to Fame footage or any of that stuff. And my promo video is pretty out of the box. I keep thinking about redoing it. I was actually just thinking about it today because it kind of gives you a sense for what I do, but I think it might be more easier if it was just more straightforward. I think when people see like the AGT footage and all that other stuff, it really gives you the credibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of told my story through the video too, from, last place to national champion and talk about getting bullied and then to the stage of America's Got Talent. So I kind of try to tell a story through the promo.
Do you do the videos or do you have them done?
Oh, that was another thing. So back in the day when I was doing X Games, I made my own instructional DVD back when DVDs were selling. I had like a top selling how-to DVD for BMX for many years. So that was a nice little side project. So yeah, I learned all the editing and the motion graphics and stuff. So yep. So like my bullying story, right? So growing up, the bikers and skaters, we were the guys who got picked on and we were different and we didn't fit in. And what I do, the flatland stuff, we would just practice in like an empty parking lot all night. And you're basically just like a sitting target. Guys would just drive by in their cars and throw glass bottles at you and try and mess with you on the south side of Chicago. Not like bad area. There wasn't the best areas around. So yeah, it was a little tricky.
But now that's part of your story.
It worked out great. Yeah, I got some great stories to tell. And some, that's the other thing about my show. A lot of the teachers are like, we like this because it's real. It's a real story of something that actually happened. The other thing is like super important about my story is the media is always portraying these bullying stories with a negative ending. They end in suicide or cutting. And so I think it's great for kids to see, look, this guy went through a really hard time, but he came out stronger and now here he is. And your story can have a happy ending too.
Yeah, they can relate to it because a lot of them are going through what you went through.
A lot of this stuff was like during like 6th grade, 7th, especially 7th grade was like the toughest time. You guys are right in the middle of it, Yeah, that middle school, statistically, bullying is worse in middle school, even worse than high school. And yeah, I think they said it peaks in like 7th grade or something like that. So I believe it. Now, Tim Hannig recently went to one of your shows, right? Oh, yeah. He did a quick little interview on it. You named me. You said, I turned down a bunch of California shows. Oh, yeah. And so John Abrams doesn't have to worry. And I thank you for that. I appreciate that. No problem. Oh, I got to tell you though, when it snowed here in April, and I definitely went on Zillow and started looking up houses in California. Oh, I'll bet you did. I've turned down probably like 100 shows this year just in California. And I don't even perform there. Did they just find my website? Yeah, it's crazy, like the amount of leads I get, because I think I come up on like the first page of Google or something like that.
You do nationally. I've looked it up only because we're in the same business, you know.
I put in some work on the website, not exactly sure how that worked, but it worked out great for me. And as long as Google still likes me. So, I get about half the leads I get are from out of town, about half are local.
And you don't go out of town because flying with the bike is tough? Flying
is like the worst. So I experimented with flying like back in the day. I flew to New Jersey for a school show, and they were like, yeah, you could use our sound system. So normally when I go to a school, like a contest, I just fly with my bike, no big deal. Because if you get a flat tire or something breaks, like there's other bikes there. Well, if you're doing a one-person school show and your bike breaks, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
So I flew to New Jersey, and my flight was super delayed. I didn't get into like 3 a.m. And I used to games medals in a glass frame, and I would show them off. This was like before I was more polished as a speaker, so I kind of used this visual prop. Well, I forgot to take the glass out of the frame, and I packed it with all the clothes I was supposed to wear. So I get to the airport, and there's like 1 million pieces of shattered glass all over the clothes I'm supposed to wear. So I show up at the school the next morning on like 3 hours of sleep. They have a guitar amplifier for me instead of a sound system.
Perfect.
So yeah, and then as the principal's introducing me, ladies and gentlemen, I can't make this up. Ladies and gentlemen, here's Matt Wilhelm. My front tire blew up.
No.
It's the worst. So I was like, no more flying for shows, for school shows. So I did have a spare inner tube in the car, but I had to change it. Yeah, it was pretty bad.
And people are waiting for you, time's ticking away.
Oh yeah, and it was like a kindergarten through second show. So I'm pretty sure like 3 kids in the front row started crying from the loud noise.
Right, crying and I gotta pee.
Yeah, when you start a show, you don't want to make the kids cry.
Yeah. It's not a good way to open.
Yeah, like flying with a bike is always a hassle too. So when I was doing NBA halftime shows, they booked me for the same day it was Mother's Day, it was playoffs, it was Lakers against Spurs. And I remember because Shaq walked right by me as we were going on. The airline had a mechanic strike and didn't tell anyone. So the agent booked me for the same day, and it was like an afternoon game, and the flight was super delayed. So I landed at San Antonio Airport at the beginning of the second quarter, and I was supposed to perform halftime.
Oh no.
And my bike was still in pieces in the box. So I cut in front of everyone in line in the taxi stand, and I built the bike in like 10 seconds, and I somehow made it in the nick. It was unreal. I can't believe I made that show. You're like,
excuse me, pardon me, look out.
Yeah, I was like, hey, do you guys like the Spurs? Who's a Spurs fan? And they all look at me like I'm some crazy guy at the airport. I'm like, I'm doing their halftime in like 10 minutes, so let me take the next cab.
I'm going to remember that next time I'm in a hurry.
Oh, you just make it up.
Well, tell us about your Guinness World Record. How did that come about?
Oh, sure. So I was originally supposed to do it on the Today Show, like on the Plaza or whatever like that. And then Today Show, like 4 days before, they're like, we're going with other records. So they went with more like clickbait type records of a guy popping balloons with his mouth, a guy doing a standing backflip into a pair of jeans. I'm like, okay, I get what you guys are going for. So Guinness actually like flew to Chicago, and they were like, we'll film it live on our Facebook page. I'm like, who's going to watch this? Apparently a lot of people watch Guinness World Records live Facebook page. So it got like 100,000 views or something crazy. But yeah, I did like the most tail whips in 30 seconds.
What is a tail whip?
A tail whip's like you're on the front of the bike, you're on the front wheel, and the back end of the bike swings around. So I did full tail whips in 30 seconds. So with Guinness, everything has to be timed and measurable.
Right.
So you can't just be like, hey, here's like the hardest trick, because it's not timed and it's not measurable. So it's more about doing like something basic and just doing it better than anybody else.
That makes sense. Yeah. So that way they can measure it, and that way someone can break it or not.
Right. Yeah. And if any performers out there, if you can get a Guinness record, I highly recommend it, because it's like the gold standard, especially among school kids. Cause I've won X Games medals, national titles, and it was like never enough. They're like, yeah, but do you have any Guinness records?
Yeah.
And I'd be like, well, no, I don't have any Guinness records. So now I got the Guinness record, and they've just shut up about it.
I interviewed Josh Horton, who is a juggler, the most downloaded juggler in the world.
Okay.
And his big spin, the reason he's the most downloaded juggler in the world is because he breaks a new world record every week, he and his buddy.
I think I heard that one. Yeah, I heard that one.
It's a good way to get people to tune in. Something about that Guinness Book of World Record, it really impresses people.
And you could get like a Guinness record for pretty much anything, as long as it hasn't been done.
Yeah, he breaks world records, things like the most times you throw a hat on somebody's head from 40 feet.
Exactly. And do you know how Guinness record started?
No.
It was 2 guys who worked for Guinness Beer Company. This according to their Wikipedia page, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Two guys who work for Guinness Beer Company went on a hunting expedition for like birds, and a bird flew away, and they were arguing in the pub afterwards. That's got to be the fastest bird. And the other guy was like, no, that's not the fastest bird. So they argued, and they were like, you know what? People in pubs all across Ireland are probably having these pub disputes. We need an official record book to settle these pub disputes. So Guinness commissioned them to do a record book to settle these bar arguments. And it eventually became the Guinness Book of World Records. So it was started by the beer company. And, now they're totally separate. And when you set the record, they're like, don't talk about that.
Too late.
That's how it got started.
That's fascinating. I love that. Well, now you were on AGT, so tell us about that the whole process. So you started by sending in a YouTube video, is that right?
Yes and no. Okay. It's kind of a complicated story. That's how it looks on TV, of course. They contacted me the first year the show was ever on, back in like 2005 or 6. They back to me until last second, and they were like, yeah, we want you on. But I had already committed to do this Master of Champions show on ABC, so I couldn't do it. And then I had tried out 2 other times after that. I didn't make the cut. So finally, like years went, and then they found one of my YouTube videos, like a different producer, and he was like, hey, we want you to come audition. So I got to skip the line. They came to Chicago. I nailed the audition in front of the producers, which you don't see on TV. This is just behind the scenes. So you qualify for like the celebrity judge round, which is the first thing you see on TV. When you walk out on stage, you're like, hey, I'm Matt Wilhelm. I'm from Chicago. I ride bikes. So I fly to Minneapolis for the celebrity judge thing. And right before I did this, I had made that. Did you see that glow in the dark video that I did for my audition? Yeah. So I was like, okay, if I make it to Hollywood, I want to do something different. I want to do like glow in the dark because it always seems to do well on the show. So I rented all this high powered black lights and this stuff. And I filmed a video of me riding glow in the dark. And right before I went on stage in Minneapolis, which I didn't do glow in the dark Minneapolis, and I didn't even do my hardest tricks because I was like, I got to save something for Vegas week. You got to step it up every week. So right before I went on stage, I showed the producers this video. I go, hey, if I make it to Hollywood, I want to do this. So like, whoa, that's awesome. So I go out on stage. I kind of bomb.
Oh, no.
Like, I wouldn't say I bombed, but like I definitely wasn't doing my hardest tricks. My flight also came in at 3 a.m. or something the night before, and my aunt had just passed away, and like I wasn't in the right headspace. Yeah. I wrote okay, but it wasn't anything to write home about. And I got 2 X's when I was up there.
Oh no.
And then I was arguing with Piers Morgan on stage. He was like, well, we want to see danger and flips. I'm like, well, this is different. This is like jazz guitar versus rock guitar. But I was pretty funny on stage, and I think they like my personality. Anyway, long story short, they never filmed that. I had one of the producers there tell me, well, that video you showed us is pretty good. We think you should enter that in the YouTube competition coming up. Okay, so I entered that in YouTube competition. They never showed the thing that happened in Minneapolis. I won the YouTube competition outright. And then I got to skip Vegas week. I went straight to Hollywood, and then made it to the semifinals. So it was actually really good that I got to skip that other stuff.
Wow. It was a blessing in disguise.
It was, yeah. And I had a great experience with AGT. And I actually, I had a feeling I wasn't going to make it past the semifinals. You can just kind of get a vibe of what's going on. And I kind of crashed. I wouldn't say crashed. I slipped off the peg on my last performance. It feels like I got like dishonorably discharged. I still got a standing ovation, which was great. But if I wouldn't have done that, it would have been like, oh yeah, I just didn't make it to the next round. But now sometimes the kids are like, you crashed on America's Got Talent. And I'm like, yeah, I wish you wouldn't see that.
You're like, leave me alone.
So the first week I was on, it went great. They were putting me in all the promos. They said I was like $1 million actor. I filmed my audition video on the cell phone. I think that cell phone is going to take you all the way to the $1 million. Yeah. And they all loved it. And the crazy thing was, I was glow in the dark. I went to Walmart. So I had like 2 weeks off in between shows. I came home. I went to Walmart, I think 2 days later, to get some equipment for my next performance. I got recognized in the parking lot at Walmart. The guy was like, hey, you were just on AGT. I'm like, dude, I was glow in the dark. How did you even see me? Yeah. So it must have been like from the B-roll footage or the results show or something like that. Sure. It's crazy how many people watch that show. And then my friend Terry Adams, he's like the other top BMX flatline guy in the US. He rides for Red Bull. He was flying somewhere for Red Bull, and he was getting on his the transit bus at the airport or whatever. Yeah. And the bus driver is like, hey, what do you got in that that bag? He's like, oh, it's a BMX bike. And the bus driver goes, hey, did you see that guy on America's Got Talent last night? And Terry's like, yeah, he's one of my best friends. He's like, no, he's not. You're just saying that. No, really he is. He's like, no, you don't know that guy. He's on America's Got Talent.
He's this strange being from another world.
Yeah, it's just crazy how many people watch that show. Yeah, but I had a really good experience, and it worked. I wanted that clip of them saying something with $1 million, and they said it. And then if I would have got the top 10, I would have had to done their tour, which I would have cost me a lot of money because I would have had to turn down all my school shows. It was really good that I didn't get the top 10, in my opinion. But it's probably sour grapes.
And you still got the great footage.
I got the great footage. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, to put on your website.
So, and it's like once you're on AGT, it's kind of a mixed bag because people think this is like your crowning achievement. And they're like, tell me about when you were on America's Got Talent. It had to be awesome. I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm way more proud of being a national champion and training and competing against guys who have trained their whole lives to be in the X Games versus competing against singers and dancers and a little kid who sings. You're comparing apples and oranges here. So people think that's like your crowning achievement.
It's because it goes into their living room.
Yep, exactly. They feel like they know you.
All right, well, we're going to move on to a fact or something John just made up. Sound like fun?
Sounds like, yep, let's do it.
Is it fact? Or is it something John just made up?
All right, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to give you a headline, and you're going to tell me if it's true or not. And if it is true, tell me a little more about it.
Okay, sure.
Here we go. First headline. Matt made Nick Cannon laugh Mountain Dew out of his nose on the stage of AGT.
That is true.
Okay.
It was like the first week you do a rehearsal, the day of the show, right? I had no idea how this was going to go. And this was the week where they were like pumping me up and I was on all, promos, and we did this like fake interview after my performance in the rehearsal. And Nick Cannon had like a bag of Cheetos and the crook of his arm. And he had he was drinking a Mountain Dew on the stage. It was like pretty informal. He was wearing sweats. And as he was taking a sip of Mountain Dew, like he was giving me this real serious interview. So he gave me this serious question. He handed me the mic, took a sip of Mountain Dew, and I made some joke about, I just would never be here without those nerds at YouTube. If they hadn't spent all that time in their bedroom just nerding out, I wouldn't be on this stage because I wouldn't have, whatever it was. And he just laughed Mountain Dew out of his nose, like all over the stage. And it was super funny.
Oh, that's great.
Well, if this goes horribly wrong tonight, at least I got a funny story to tell. So that was it. Yeah.
Wish you had that on video.
And it was crazy too, because that week, I didn't know how it was going to go. And I had only done the glow in the dark blacklight thing that one time at home for the audition video. When I got to LA, I was like, oh, they're going to let me rehearse all week. I only got to run through it 5 times in the blacklight. And then I had to do it live in front of 15 million people. So it was so crazy. And then I had a line of green tape on the front of the stage so I wouldn't fall off. And before the show went live, they were like, can we take this green tape off? The camera might pick it up. And I was like, no. And the other crazy thing was after the rehearsal, they changed up the show order. And so then a dance team went out live before me, and they had all this dry ice that was coming out on the stage. And so the stage of America's Got Talent, the side of the stage was like that. I don't know what you call that shiny black, like lame. What is that stuff? There was a film on there from the dry ice, and you couldn't even really walk on it. And I'm like, how am I going to ride? But the center of the stage had these lights because the stage would light up. And so that material was different. That was more like a regular painted wood. And so as long as I stuck in the middle, I was okay. Man, that was probably the most tense moment ever.
That's stressful.
Okay, we're in commercial. Matt, you're up in 3 minutes, and I can't even ride a bike in a circle, and you want me to do tricks? That was kind of nuts. But during the commercial break, somebody goes, hey, do a trick, in the audience. And the cameras weren't rolling. It was commercial. And so I did a trick, and people started cheering. And I was like, it was like an icebreaker. I'm like, oh, this is going to go okay. And, it worked out okay. So
thank goodness.
I was glad that guy, thank God. I think it was probably a friend who yelled it out. Who knows? But it worked out. I don't know.
If you crash and burn, they're going to show it 1,000 times.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
Yep. All right, we're going to go on to the next one. After a school show, the kids rushed Matt for autographs, and in all the chaos, one kid broke his arm.
Oh, I wish that was not true, but that is totally true.
Oh, no. What happened?
Oh, my gosh. It was an outdoor show at the end of the school day, and the kids think I'm way more famous than I am, and they all want my autograph. And so the buses were out in front of the school. Well, my show was in the back. The kids had decided to ditch their bus and come in the back to get autographs. Well, word got out, and there's those dreaded words where they go, "There he is."
Yep.
And then they just make a beeline for you. And there was just all this chaos, and 2 kids collided. A kid broke his arm. I had to take him to the office. It looked like I was the bad guy. And I was like, where are the adults? There are no adults back there. It was just, chaos. So they finally booked me this year at that school, but that was like 10 years ago. And PTA is different. Principal is different. They didn't know about it.
Nobody said, hey, wasn't that the guy who broke that kid's arm?
Yeah. And then, how it is, the story will probably, I'm sure that the game of telephone, the teachers will, because I was at a school a few years ago, and I never propped doors, but I propped a door to get my equipment cart out, and a gust of wind blew, and it blew the door, and it slammed onto my equipment cart, and the window broke. Mm-hmm. And it was the last day of school. So I did this show 3 years later, and the teachers I was like, oh yeah, I'll try not to break a window this year. And the teacher goes, yeah, we heard you were doing tricks in the hallway and broke the window.
Oh yeah.
I was like, what? I wasn't doing tricks in the hallway. Who made that up?
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, next one. Matt's front wheel fell off in the middle of a stunt. He continued the rest of the routine with only one wheel.
That is not true. I did have half a handlebar break off in a parade once, and I finished the parade.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Never. That's a new trick, though. I'll work on that one. The front wheel. I think there was a guy in Cirque du Soleil who had a lever on his bike, and the bike would come apart or something like that.
Oh, uh-huh.
So maybe I should do that. Yeah.
Maybe. I know when I was a little kid, I learned how to ride a bike when I was a little older, actually, like 8 or something. And the reason I made this up is because I was the big BMX guy, hopping off a curb at 8 or 9 years old. Sure enough, my front wheel came off.
Oh.
And the forks went right into the blacktop and just stuck.
And you probably flipped over the bars and did major face plant or something.
Absolutely. It was perfect.
And you'll never forget that.
I will never.
And let me guess, when you go riding now, you check the front wheel every single time.
Even if I just go on a leisurely ride, I check both wheels, make sure they're in there.
Oh, yeah.
All right, next one. Matt turned down performing at the Grammys to instead perform at a Cub Scout banquet.
Oh, I wish that wasn't true, but that is also totally true.
Oh, no.
Oh, I'm still kicking myself for this one. So a Cub Scout group had booked me for a show on a Sunday for their Blue and Gold banquet, and they rented out this banquet hall. And I got a call on Tuesday from, I don't know if you're familiar with Matt Hoffman. He's kind of like the Tony Hawk of BMX.
Okay.
But he's a big deal in BMX. But he's like, hey, the Grammys, Arcade Fire, you probably know that band. They actually won the Album of the Year that year. They're going to close out the Grammys, and they want some bikes in their performance.
No.
I got a Cub Scout thing on Sunday. And they rented out a banquet hall. So I tried finding someone else to do the show, and I couldn't find anyone. I'm going to have to say no. But this was right when I was about to be on AGT. The wheels were in motion, it was maybe going to happen from the Minneapolis thing. And I was like, I really don't want to screw up the AGT thing. Maybe if I'm on the Grammys, they're not going to pick me for AGT, or I don't know. Yeah, I definitely turned down the Grammy. But that was the year I think Christina Aguilera slipped on the stage. Mm-hmm. And I tell myself now, that stage was probably too slippery to ride on, so I probably would have fallen anyway, and it would have been horrible.
Oh, it would have been a horrible disaster. Thank goodness.
And they had crazy flashing strobes. I don't know how I would have done tricks. So they got guys who just rode around in circles around the band with helmet cams, and it looked cool, but nobody did tricks.
It just would have been a good story going to the Grammys.
But yeah, I definitely turned down the Grammys to perform for Cub Scouts. So there's that.
I had one time when I turned down a party at Kate Hudson. You know who Kate Hudson is?
Yep.
Yeah, Kate Hudson's house. Her kid's birthday, because I was booked at another birthday party years ago.
That sucks.
Trying to have some integrity.
So the silver lining, though, I definitely told the parents there, hey, I could be at the Grammys. No, really, I could be at the Grammys right now, but I'm performing for you. So they referred me to every school in the district, and it was a huge district, and I got tons of school shows out of it. So yeah, I probably would have got nothing out of the Grammys, just been an extra in the background. So
that was fact or something John just made up.
So we're going to go on to some fan questions. You have a fan question. You have a big fan.
I have a fan?
You have a fan.
All right.
Well, you have a number of fans, but only one that wrote a question.
Okay.
Are you ready for it?
Sure.
Doug Shear of Shear Genius. You know Doug, right?
I love Doug. Yeah, I actually saw one of his shows. I was in Michigan. I went to see him. The show was awesome. So yeah, he's brilliant. He's awesome.
I've never seen his show, but he's also one of the best school assembly guys in the country.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing for sure.
Yeah. All right. So his question That's a statement and a question. You do more well-paid school shows than anyone on the planet, but you don't do direct mail, you don't do cold calling, yet you're booked solid, and that's simply because your show is awesome.
Okay.
Wait, that wasn't the question.
Oh, I thought I was going to get away easy.
Should I stop there?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to continue though.
Okay.
The laws of supply and demand should tell you to raise your price. Is that something you're considering, or do you fear you might be pricing yourself out of the market? How do you know when your price is right?
Oh, sure. About pricing. So, yeah, I'm always struggling with this, right? Because you're booked every day. And I was like, you probably shouldn't be booked every day. Like, most people who are, pretty successful aren't busy every day. They have free time.
Right.
So this year I raised my price like 20%.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I'll have Fridays off. But I booked just as many shows or even more shows. And I might be booking them at a lower success rate, but I was getting more leads. So it ended up being like more... Gosh, I'm not really. So what's the question? How to know if you're priced right? I kind of ask sometimes the principals and PTAs are pretty upfront. You're like, hey, what other assemblies do you have? What kind of budget do you guys have? And sometimes I'm pretty straightforward. I'm like, hey, I'm trying not to travel. I'm trying to stay as close to home as I can, but I'm pretty direct with people. And sometimes they'll tell you, if you go over $1,000 for a show, like, yeah, you're going to be priced out.
I find that also. I find the $1,000 mark seems to be the either you do a lot of shows or you can book some for over $1,000.
Yeah.
But once you get over that $1,000, you're booking less.
Exactly right. And so I get a lot of out of town stuff. And so I'm trying to stay within 3 hours of my house if I can. And that would be maybe once every week or two where I actually leave town. Sometimes I'm gone like every week for like a day or two. I obviously say like, hey, I'm not coming there for less than, whatever. So find another school and it'll be like basically the same price, but I'll do 2 shows for the same price of one.
I used to only do Southern California. And now that my kids have moved out, when I get a call from another state, for example, from Northern California, which is basically another state.
Yeah.
I say I need 5 schools because then I'll go up there for an entire week, but I don't have kids in the house now.
Right. Me, I'm trying to get home by dinner time or just not be in the car. Like I'm so sick of driving.
Before I let you go here, do you have some advice for the beginner or the pro?
Oh, sure. So beginner, gosh, there's so much to say. Go with the flow. If you're performing at schools, your show might start 15 minutes late. It might start 15 minutes early. So obviously get early. And if there's anything that's going to mess up your show, don't be too overly flexible and overly accommodating. I used to just do whatever seating whatever seating layout they did, I would be like, you guys do. But they would often perform with the kids. If you picture a rectangle, they do it where the kids are like, I'm on like the short end of the gym and the kids go all the way back.
Yeah.
That might work for a magic show because a lot of stuff is visually up. But for my bike show, the bike is on the ground. So you want to like spread out the first row. So I try and do like a U seating thing. So anyway, just go with the flow. But if there's something that's, going to mess you up, to like obviously speak up. And like when you're first starting out, I realized there's basically like 3 levels of shows. You're like good enough to get paid. And I was that for a little bit, like, all right, I did the show. They paid me. Yay. And then you're like, the next level is good enough to get rebooked. Right. Mm-hmm. And then there's like another level, which is good enough to where they want to tell all their friends about you and post about you on Facebook and get on their principal listservs. And I get tons of shows off this Illinois Principals Association listserv, which I have no access to. It's just principals talking to each other. I get so many shows from these principals just going, hey, we had Matt Wilhelm here last week. Another big one would be if you're doing a school assembly, try and become part of the school culture. Don't just be like a 45-minute show that's forgotten. I leave like some autograph posters after the show with my message on there, like never give up, be kind, be somebody's Batman. And then I also created like a free follow-up video series that's like videos on YouTube. And then the teachers can just go on my website and there's different like role play scenarios and key points and situations. So they're like constantly referring back to you. You're like always on their mind. You're not just, hey, that was that show. That was great, but we forgot about it.
Right.
Yeah, anything you could do to like become more than a 45-minute show would be great. And then I think the last thing is the message is the most important, but you can't have the message without being entertaining. And you can't have message or entertaining if you don't have good audience management skills. You know this, you do school shows. If the kids are like talking during your message, you're basically judged on how bad the worst kid is at your show, which sucks, but that's kind of how it is.
Yep.
That's basically the advice.
Okay, so was that for the beginner and the pro?
Sure, I can do a quick for pro real quick.
Sure.
Always carry some black duct tape with you. A Gorilla Tape is great. It doesn't leave residue. That saved me a lot of times. I mean, I think the main advice for working pro, I know tons of working pros listen to this, is like, I used to say yes to like every gig, even if it wasn't a good fit. I would do a lot of libraries and shows where I couldn't do my message either, like a festival or a fair. But I would never get referrals off those shows because my show was fine, but it wasn't like the magic of what I do at like a school show.
All right, so give us one recommended book and then I'll let you go.
Okay, sure. So the two that really helped me with my like speaking and my motivational speaking at the shows, there's one called Communicating for a Change by Andy Stanley. I think he's actually like a pastor, but it's not really like churchy, but it's, anyway, but it's basically just about how to tell a story in a simple way that people remember it. And along those lines, another book called Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. And it's just about making your message like simple and how it should be unexpected and emotional. Like that was another thing, like my bullying talk, like I made sure to kind of put some emotion in there, but make sure it has a happy ending, make it have some emotion so people respond to it.
Those are great. In fact, I'll see if I can hunt those down on Amazon and I'll put those on your show page if that's okay.
Sounds great.
Well, thanks, Matt. That was awesome. That was fun.
Great. Thanks, John. Yeah, great talking to you.
Thanks for doing my show. So wait, before I let you go, where can somebody get a hold of you, or do you want to promote some social media?
Sure. I'm not really promoting anything, but if anyone wants to follow me on social, it's at Matt Wilhelm BMX. And you could just Google Matt Wilhelm and my website comes up too. So check that out. Say what's up.
Excellent. And thanks to all my variety artists. If you found this podcast valuable, tell a friend to listen. Say, listen to this podcast. Listen to Matt Wilhelm.
Tell your friends.
You can reach me at my email address at john@thevarietyartist.com or join my Facebook group at The Variety Artist, where you can ask me to ask questions of our guests. Now go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.
That's all for this episode of The Variety Artist, but your journey continues on our website. Go to thevarietyartist.com for more strategies, insight, and resources, as well as show notes on today's guest to assist you in your career. We'll see you on the next episode of The Variety Artist. But until then, go out and book those gigs, make some money, and have some fun.